What if your best years are being stolen by a simple slogan? We're told that 30 is the new 20, but that isn't lifestyle advice. It's a heist on your future. We glamorize the drift of our 20s because we're terrified of pouring a foundation. But here is the truth. A foundation isn't what traps you. It's the only thing that keeps your life from crumbling when the world gets heavy. This is why 30 is not the new 20. It's a lie that we've all been sold to keep us in a state of permanent childhood. Today, I want to break down the hidden cost of staying young and the truth about why your 20s were never a rehearsal for life. Before this goes any further, I want to take the pressure off. It is completely normal not to have your life figured out yet, and I want to make that clear. This isn't a flaw. That's part of being human, reinvention, and going through your chapters. But most of us are improvising far longer than we admit. What becomes dangerous is when we romanticize that uncertainty, when confusion becomes an identity, when delay becomes something we defend. Because there's a big difference between exploring and drifting. Exploration has intent, even if it's messy. Drift is just movement without direction. And when a culture starts glamorizing drift, something strange happens. Responsibility gets reframed as oppression. Commitment gets treated like a loss of freedom. But commitment and responsibility are not prison bars. They are stabilizers. Without them, we don't become liberated. We become fractured. A society without sacrifice or progress doesn't become enlightened. It becomes self-absorbed, pleasure-driven, chronically anxious. Everything becomes about experience and nothing compounds. I know this personally, and I spent a portion of my 20s as Peter Pan man. Explore everything, commit to nothing. Travel, dating, partying, constant novelty, and I don't say that with regret or shame either. But that season taught me things I couldn't have learned any other way. But it was always meant to be a season. Even back then, underneath all the movement, I knew what I ultimately wanted. And without the fancy vision board, I did journal daily. A secure relationship, a family, a life that would hold weight when things got hard. I didn't want to be endlessly entertained. I wanted to be rooted, grounded, but I was scared of that. Because roots feel like finality. They feel like doors closing. So instead, I just kept moving, kept distracting, kept procrastinating. What I didn't understand then is this. Avoiding responsibility doesn't preserve freedom. It just delays maturity. Here's the part we don't like to talk about. Time is not neutral. Do you remember the crocodile in Peter Pan? The one with the clock inside its big jaggedy mouth with teeth? That thing never stops moving, and it's gonna bite you and catch you. You can distract yourself from it, you can pretend it's not there, but you cannot negotiate with it. And regret isn't some moral punishment, it's information. It's what happens when we treat time like it's infinite. When people hear this, they often say, "So what? We're supposed to rush everything?" No. But I want you to notice something. A lot of people quietly live inside this sentence. I'll put off commitment for a little while. The danger isn't the sentence, it's how quietly a little while turns into years. Because delay doesn't announce itself as failure. It feels comfortable, it feels reasonable, until one day, the options you assumed would always be there aren't. The good ones get snapped up. Not because you're unworthy, because timing matters. So let's pause here and look at it in a context of a relationship and look at ways we commit typically.
Don't nobody else make me feel like no broke boys, no new friends. Don't nobody else make me feel like no broke boys, no new friends.
Unmarried in your 30s should honestly be rebranded as congratulations for not panic marrying the wrong person and nonchalantly cycling through a bridge. This is where people misunderstand the point. This is not about panic marrying. It's not about rushing into kids. It's not about committing to the wrong person just to avoid being alone. It's about recognizing that choosing nothing is still a choice. Discernment is different from avoidance. Now, cool, people are on their own timelines, but when we prolong timelines, you might be too late. When my wife came into my life, it was when I least expected it. As I say, God comes into your life a few times. But when we pass up those opportunities too often than not, we start to drift. There is no purpose, there's no direction, and you do not know what you truly want. And I'm a man of standards. And when we have this perfectionistic standard that we'll wait for forever, we could be waiting for a long time. I like the acronym that good enough is great. And when I was on a call to my dad when I first met my wife, and a couple of great conversations I had after I'd met my wife, I was scared of commitment. I wanted to stay in freedom. I wanted to be single and do things by my own devices. A good conversation with a friend said, if you found a good one, why not? You've gone through some previous shenanigans with other women and it's not been good for you. So commit to the one that feels good. You're not going to get perfect in your mind's eye unless that person's wearing a persona, because naturally we are flawed. And potentially we're scared, but it's all dressed up as standards. And we've got to get out of our own way for what's really good for us. I think maybe there's a worthiness element that we fear letting ourselves down when the opportunity comes around. And there's another belief that sounds harmless but does damage. The idea that your 40s are hard. Kids, aging parents, responsibility everywhere. So your 30s should be the last laugh, the last binge, the final chapter of freedom before reality sets in. But that framing is upside down. What it really does is encourage short-term comfort at the expense of long-term stability. Quick gratification feels soothing now, but it almost always shows up later as panic or regret. Comfort now costs later. Now, this is where the conversation around kids usually also gets heated. So I want to slow this down now. Should you have kids? Let's play.
Tried everything from gentle parenting to strict boundaries. Nothing works. I genuinely hate being a parent. I hate the thankless grind of it all. And yes, hate is a strong word, but after 10 years, I feel like parenting has been one long, soul-sucking mistake. If I didn't have such a strong, loving relationship with my husband, I would have walked away by now and left them all behind.
The mother doing this.
I share this because I wish someone had been brutally honest with me before I had kids. We are sold this idea of a village, but for most of us, there is no village. Grandparents still working full-time, unaffordable childcare options, no community to lean on. You cannot predict the child you'll get. Some are easy, but some will test every last shred of your mental and emotional stability. All I can do now is endure. I'm counting down the years until they move out and I can reclaim myself. But for now, I live with huge regret.
So let's look really closely at this and what's actually happening here. This isn't children being the problem, I don't think. This is burnout colliding with poor foundations, and that's societal as well. And here's a nuance we don't talk about enough. Permissive parenting, when you're just a bit too relaxed. Authoritarian parenting, where you're just like a Hitler to your kids. And neglectful parenting, where you're just not giving them any attention, all create instability in different ways. When boundaries aren't set early, your kids aren't getting enough attention, and when attachment isn't built early, no wonder parents are overwhelmed, unsupported, and resentful in the end. Children don't become the problem, they become the mirror to you. Kids amplify what already exists. They don't create resentment, they reveal it. If you secretly despise the new consequences and hadn't readied yourself or taken them head on, your kids will be the rugrats you never knew you needed as a wake-up call. And I actually bumped into a couple of Russians in Macro the other day and mentioned about having a child and the plan to have another. And they were so encouraging of it. They had two themselves in their 50s. And they said, kids bring joy, life, and not a burden. It just felt really nice. It's like they're the best thing that'll ever happen to you. And I loved another comment that this is not doom and gloom from Vesta. This is hard to listen to. Lady should strengthen herself and take more accountability on how her kids turned out because, surprise, surprise, she raised them. I genuinely do not understand how it is possible not to see the good stuff your children bring you. Super sad, poor kids. I think that is one of the greatest comments I've ever seen. Some people just need more accountability. Kids don't just magically become little savages and rugrats, it's that you were probably avoidant and not designed for it in the first place. And even if you weren't designed to it, people can neurologically change through the belief system that they have. Your biology can change, your mentality can change, and through those new habits or new neural networks you create, you can become a better person and someone who's going to attack the challenge head on and not become a victim to it What happens then? If we become a victim to our circumstances, we feel like we're totally helpless, out of control, and hopeless. And that brings a desperation, that brings a sense of a lack of agency. And when you don't have a parent that has agency, where are the kids learning from? They're learning from someone who's lost in the darkness of the oblivion. So kids are no wonder clinging to some form of structure, order, schedules. Who am I? And so they protest through their behaviour. No wonder. And that leads to another trend of intentional non-child living, because you may not feel like you're designed for the role. Let's play it through.
I don't think people without kids understand how much free time they have. Like, bro, you're basically on vacation and you don't even know it. Let me be so incredibly clear. We know. We know just how lucky we are. We know how much free time we have because, let's be honest, just because we don't have kids doesn't mean that we aren't also living life. Work, school, house chores, grocery shopping, other friends and family, taking care of pets if you have any, car expenses, phone bills. The list is endless of things that we also have to do, just in case if this is new information to you. We're basically on vacation and we don't even know it. Honestly, yeah. And for those people that are like,
oh, it must be nice.
Yes, I can guarantee you from the bottom of my mother trucking heart, it is nice. It is nice to have uninterrupted sleep. It is nice not to have to cook for anybody. It is nice to not ever have to change a diaper. It's nice not to go to a PTA program. It's nice not having to cringe at your 5th grader learning how to play the violin. Yes, life is nice. Also, for the parents that think,
This is one for another video I will do in the future, but it's sad we're spreading the normality of childlessness in the 20s to 30s when there's ruthless consequences of coping with regret. My mum, a mother of 4, one of my siblings passed away. My mum went through, a tumultuous time, juggling the demands from love to grief. She still advocates in having them. I asked my mum, and she's really celebrates children, even if it does sound like difficulty. And when the shocking news where my world ruptured when I found out I had my first daughter, she was nothing short of encouraging, as was my dad. And there's a narrative in all of this I constantly hear is don't have parents if you had a poor upbringing and or believe that you wouldn't be fit to be a parent. But what if the very moulding of your character was by having children and growing into your 30s? And there's also something deeper underlying this. We've lost our relationship with meaning in our society, with God, with being needed. Children don't take from you, they reflect you back to yourself. They teach patience, humility, presence. And all of those things are virtues for society to go in the right direction. There are moments of play and joy with your children that nothing else in life replicates. Even Jordan Peterson has said it's extremely rare that anyone finds a career more fulfilling than raising children. And that doesn't mean careers don't matter. It means meaning matters more. Here's another clip from him.
What advice do you have for a young man in his 20s?
Make a plan. Look at what you're interested in. Get disciplined about something. Allow for the possibility that you have something important to contribute to the world and that the world would be a lesser place without that contribution. Don't be afraid of taking on responsibility. It's where you find what sustains you in your life. You can take on too much responsibility. You have to be cautious in that regard, but...
And that rewires us back to the previous point. You can take too much responsibility. Maybe that woman did. She was too overburdened to take on children.
That's a less common problem than not taking on enough. A lot of the things that people regard as traps are actually the means to their life. Often young people are afraid of commitment, for example, in the context of a romantic relationship, and because they feel that that's going to interfere with their pursuit of something more valuable. But that's just not the case. You're not going to find something more valuable in your life than a committed relationship with someone that you love, that sustains itself across time, and that in all likelihood produces children. That's life. And there may be people for whom avoiding that is the better route, but those people are very rare, and you need a real reason to assume that you're one of those people. And hopefully for you, you're not. I've had a very good career, a very meaningful career in multiple dimensions, and it's still been the case for me that the most important part of my life has been my intimate relationship with my wife and my family. So don't be afraid of that, or be afraid of it, but don't let that stop you from pursuing.
Putting everything off until later does sound logical, and I agree with you. But biology doesn't negotiate. Energy doesn't negotiate. Time doesn't negotiate. Younger usually means more capacity, more resilience, more shared years. And yes, I love travel. Bali, Portugal, Australia, Europe, Thailand. You can have both, but not by pretending routes are optional forever. When I look back at my 20s, honestly, I see them in stages. Early 20s, I followed the narrative laid out for me. School, expectations, graduate university, go to a corporate and work there for a while. The path I was supposed to walk. And when I graduated at around 22, 23, I then explored travel, friends, dating, partying. Some of it was greed, some of it was destructive. But from around 23 to 25, alignment started to appear. I could see the outline of the life I wanted. My wife, stability, direction. From 25 to 28, elimination happened. Boundaries, simplification, letting go of the nice guy version of myself. The pretender, the entertainer, the person who wanted to be popular. From 28 to 30, amplification. That's when my child came into the world. Whatever I focused on grew stronger. Family, business, faith. And it's what sustains me now, I know, in hindsight, to take on things like loss, grief, and find deeper commitment, because you need it through the tragedy of life. That arc matters because in your 20s, you're trying to carve your own way. You want to build something intricate, poetic, perfect. But instead of a gaudy cathedral, it often looks like a rock that had its way with a mallet. You're a pelican with a mouthful of consumption, trying to be everything, trying to escape, trying to invent yourself. That chaos isn't a mistake, it's the process. I quit corporate, rewrote what a graduate should do, moved countries to Bali, coached before my life was together. It was naive, trying. And eventually, confusion gave way to something quieter, more grounded, more humble, more stable. Exploration expels the itches from your system, and I agree. So you can then later set roots without resentment. Failure only becomes failure when you repeat the same mistakes. Exploration has failure baked into it. That's why Jim Rohn said, and I love this quote, "What's a life without adventure?" But adventure without direction eventually becomes avoidance. And rerouting back to Peterson, taking on responsibility is a better problem than not taking on anything at all. And that's where adventure is. This isn't just philosophy. Let's play another clip here by Robert Greene.
You need to think of your 20s, which is by far the best years of your life. Let's get that straight first of all. It was the best years of my life, right? It's most exciting. You know, you're young, you look good, you got energy, you know, you dress well, probably, I hope. The thing that you want from your 20s is you want an apprenticeship, right? You want to learn. You want learning skills. You want to learn skills, solid skills, so that by the time you turn 30, which is the critical turning point in your life, I said the 20s are your most fun. The 30s are the key part of your life, which is my key part, the late 30s. When you're 30, you want to I had fun, I had adventures, I traveled, you know, I dated, I did everything I wanted, but I also learned things. I learned A, B, and C skills. You don't have to learn just one skill. You can learn 3 skills, 3 things that you master, that you spent 7 years going into deeply. But if you wasted your 20s, if you just had fun, if you just did whatever you wanted to, by the time you hit 30, nothing will stick together, nothing will cohere. You've been stretched too thin.
And what Robert Greene's really actually saying here is that skills compound, competence compounds, and fun doesn't if there's no consciousness with it. Your 20s are uniquely suited for building leverage. And in those 20s, I connected to the gym. I had built discipline. I built my business from roots. I've realized what was a more efficient way of doing things, what made more money than didn't. And that long-term effect and impact from all the skills I built up in production, public speaking, marketing has led me to grow a business that that is beyond my imagination. And that clarity only came with that exploration at the beginning in my 20s. And there's research behind this too. So let's react to another clip by Meg J. Let's go through it.
So when we think about child development, we all know that the first 5 years are a critical period for language and attachment in the brain. It's a time when your ordinary day-to-day life has an inordinate impact on who you will become. But what we hear less about is that there's such a thing as adult development, and our 20s are that critical period of adult development.
Some windows narrow quietly, and it's a time to really focus. Let's watch another clip.
But make no mistake, the stakes are very high. When a lot has been pushed to your 30s, there is enormous 30-something pressure to jumpstart a career, pick a city, partner up, and have 2 or 3 kids in a much shorter period of time. Many of these things are incompatible, and as research is just starting to show, simply harder and more stressful to do all at once in our 30s. The post-millennial midlife crisis isn't buying a red sports car. It's realizing you can't have that career you now want. It's realizing you can't have that child you now want, or you can't give your child a sibling. Too many 30-somethings and 40-somethings look at themselves and at me sitting across the room and say about their 20s, what was I doing? What was I thinking?
Regret doesn't come from trying, it comes from drifting. And that's why I always pay attention to what people actually regret. So let's have a look through some Reddit threads here. What's one thing you wish you spent more time doing in your 20s? SJ Lammer says, explore outside your comfort zone, travel, consider new ideas, talk to people you wouldn't, enjoy the uncomfortability of being in new situations. You have plenty of time to be content. Also learn as much as you can. It gets harder as you get older, interesting, especially new languages. That's on the back burner for me. We're introverted by nature, so that there's a chance to go and talk to strangers, and you get comfortable over time. I've done that, and I was a socially anxious person, and I threw myself in the deep end when I became a butler in the bath, naked party butler amongst 20 women wanting to party. It was the most scary thing I've ever done, but the most character building, and it destroyed the monster I built up in my head like no other. Someone says, be much minimalistic. Stuff, it's just junk. Value people and connections over all else. I love that. Screw video games and the like. Experiences are better than things. Again, someone who just enjoys paying for experiences over accumulating material possessions. Memories outlast. Don't waste energy or time worrying about what people think about you. And I think that comes better over time, but the earlier you learn that, the easier it gets, and the more successful you'll become in both your interactions and the less self-conscious you'll become socially, and also online to pursue your dreams. I think sometimes social media is the vehicle of how I've become successful. Not in this personal brand, of course, I hope one day, but through content I've created. It's all about the message coming outside of yourself, the value you bring, and try not to overthink it so much. I'm an overthinker, and good enough is great. So keeping that maxim when you are in social situations, just good enough is great. Put on a smile, be interested, follow up with questions. And it's really important that we develop those skills internally. Hard skills come second to these soft skills because they are extremely important in leadership, building teams, communicating, sales. They're really big skills in business as well. No one here says, I wish I partied more. They say, I wish I applied myself sooner. And every person there is not broken, they're just delayed and want to portray that wisdom. And a little bit about me, my 20s were messy. I was anxious, image focused. I'd spend 30 minutes doing my hair before I went out on a night out. I was self-obsessed, never really satisfied. I missed moments I can't get back anymore. I failed publicly many times. I hurt people unintentionally, I think, by being a nice guy and trying to be popular with everyone, but not deeply building relationships. But I didn't stop trying. By 30, something shifted, and 30 to this day, I stopped performing. I started committing. Marriage, faith, family, depth, work, purpose, provision. That's when life fully stabilized. All the monsters I used to build up in my head were the ones I needed to slay. So if there's one thing I'd leave you with, it's this. Your 20s aren't for perfection, they're for direction. Exploration is good, drift is not. Sacrifice is necessary, even if it's just a little. This isn't panic advice. You're not doomed if you're late, but earlier is easier. Mechanically, not morally. Your 20s aren't a throwaway decade. They're the foundation of the life you'll live when options narrow later. And foundations are easier to pour before the weight inevitably arrives.